Hey everyone, this is Jen. You're watching BPD Woman. On this channel, you will learn how to more effectively live and manage your borderline personality disorder. It's my goal to help you realize effective approaches and patterns to handling your emotions, identifying them, and to instilling behaviors that will effectively garner the results that you want in life, whether those goals are in love, health, relationships, emotional or financial stability. My goal is to share my own personal experience and what has worked for me as I have recovered from BPD, as well as lean on heavy skills such as DBT. I am not a therapist or a life coach or a counselor. However, I can answer one very important question that most of those folks cannot, which is, what is it like to have borderline personality disorder? I was diagnosed over 20 years ago, and I have spent years in DBT. I have spent just about every week, every day, reading major texts, rereading them, filling out workbooks, reviewing them, going to one-on-one sessions, groups, staying on top of research. I think you get the idea. I'm pretty committed. So, if that sounds good to you, please hit subscribe and the bell below so you never miss a beat. I produce anywhere from 3 to 5 videos each week, and I'd love for you to check them out. So, short video today entitled Help, How Do I Handle My BPD Episode? So when I say episode, for me, I always term that for myself to be a huge emotional dysregulated breakdown, and I would call that an episode. And if that's too negative a word for you, try something else, a BPD Kapuknik or BPD dysregulation or a BPD detonation, whatever, however a word works for you. But I use a BPD episode to describe the following. Essentially, when I'm having a BPD episode, I am beyond logical approach. So I'll throw up that little picture I have. You have wise mind, you have emotion mind, and you have emotion mind. And our goal is to stick in that gray area, what we call the wise mind, where we use our approaches and our thoughts of our logic, along with how we feel about our situation, the emotion, to come together to inform a decision or solve a problem or approach life using what we call the wise mind or the gray area. Don't forget, black and white thinking, splitting, the huge hallmark of having BPD, right? So we want to get in that gray area as much as possible if we're interested in recovering from those patterns of behavior. Now, 6 years ago, I was in 2 back-to-back rounds of DBT. So I did 1, 2, 3, 4 modules, and then I repeated it once again with the same group, the same psychologist, 1, 2, 3, 4 modules. So essentially, I was in DBT for an entire year with the same counselors. Some of the group obviously changed. People came in and out at different times. And I got to know these counselors extremely well. I saw them on average 3 times a week for a year. That's almost like dating someone, right? Okay, so I got to know them well. And at that time, I was no longer cutting, but I was no longer drinking. So I had obviously progressed by getting rid of some destructive behaviors that weren't helpful to me. And instead, I would have intense crying spells. Now, occasionally, I still have these. And right now, obviously, we're all a bit more isolated from each other. So there's a little bit less stimulus to trigger us, or what I would call triggering my BPD episode. But when I am around with someone for a lengthy period of time, or I'm dating someone, and if it's toxic, or even if it's just too much, I become so overwhelmed that what generally starts to happen is I cannot be approached logically, not for a while, because remember, when emotion is high, logic is low. Emotion high, logic low. So a BPD breakdown episode for me would be intense crying, unconsolable crying. It could be spurred by a few other crying sessions. And as you know, you become more dysregulated, your tolerance for dealing with other kinds of stimulus or other upsetting events gets a little bit lowered, right? It's like having a sunburn. Like if I touched my skin right now, I feel okay. I can handle that. That feels all right. But if I was in a tanning bed, which I've never been in, but if I was in a tanning bed and I got burned, right? You touched it, I'd be like, ow, right? And then if I went back to a tanning bed the second day, even now I'm getting tanned on top of my burn, ow, ow, right? So it's gonna hurt more and more. So for me, the BPD episode looks like extreme crying, lengthy crying, uncontrollable, where it goes on for quite a lengthy period of time, maybe 20, 30 minutes. And that's followed by extreme patterns of dysregulated thinking, of, more distortions come into play. Don't forget, logic high, emotion high, logic low. So more distortions come in. I begin to, hear more self-talk. It's a road to hell is what it is for me. So I call that the BPD episode. Now, this video is not about how to prevent those episodes from happening, as in regards to the stimulus, like what are your triggers? Although that's a good question to ask yourself, in what situations and in what people are you more triggered? This video is going to help you figure out what to do when you're about to have one of those episodes. And I want to tell you how this came to light for me. I'll go back. This is now 2014 or so it's a good 6 years ago. And as I mentioned, I did 2 back-to-back rounds of DBT. And I had an older, she was actually one of the founders of this center, a psychologist, a female, who I liked, mostly. And I was having a coaching call with her. I had texted her. I was like, I need a coaching call. I'm in distress. And I was sobbing and I was crying. And she was really, and like I said, she was like in her 80s. She was clinically detached. She felt cold. She felt very logical on the other end of the phone, which, in retrospect, now I realize she had to be, right? Because she couldn't play into me getting amped up. Like, the best way from her perspective to help me calm down was to not be reactive herself. So, I'm crying and I'm going on, and I'm trying to tell her this situation. It was about some guy, if I remember correctly, and I'm trying to tell her the situation, and she goes, Jennifer, Jen, you got to stop this crying. You got to stop this crying. And I was like, what? Like, how dare you? That is so rude. Like, I'm having a breakdown. I am paying you so that you can be on the phone while I have a breakdown. She goes, this is not helping. We have to get this crying under control, which, actually triggered me a little bit more to cry a little bit more. And she goes, this is not going to help you get anywhere. I want you to ask yourself, this is what she said. I want you to ask yourself, what skill could you be using right now? She was so good at that, like I would be presenting a problem, right? And she might say something, well, what's a good way to make a decision in the middle, right? So instead of thinking black or white, she encouraged me to think in the middle. What's a good way to think in the middle? And so she said, you can't, all this crying's not helping. You got to stop all this crying. This is not helpful. What skill could you use instead? I was like, cry more. Now in this particular instance, probably the best stimulus for me was to use, obviously, some distress tolerance skills. So I was beyond, emotional regulation. I was beyond mindfulness. I was in no state to be interpersonally effective. So I was like, okay, this was be distress tolerant. And so I said, I don't know, take a hot bath. She's like, yes, that's great. That's a good idea. Distress tolerance skills, if you're not familiar with DBT, are meant to physiologically get you out of your emotional state. Okay, there is a correlation between how your mind works and how your body responds. So the calmer your body can be, the mind will follow. The calmer your mind is, the body will follow. Yoga is a perfect example, if you've ever done yoga, right? Anytime I could be in the most stressed out position, but if I fully give myself over to practicing yoga, at the end of it, I'm like, hey, everybody, I just feel like I smoked a doobie, right? Like I feel really calm because The body was calmed and stretched, and then my mind became calm. So there is a strong correlation between the physiological effects of the mind on the body and vice versa. So what she taught me to do was, when I am having a problem, when I am faced with a situation that's overwhelming, when I am about to have a BPD episode, and that could look like anything. It's just a dysregulated state, emotional, or you're about to walk into your boss's office, put down your resignation and walk the hell out of there. It could be anything that is about to become problematic for you, whether that's going to have some impact on you. To ask yourself in that moment, what skill could I use right now? And it could be a distress tolerance skill. If you're about to, have an episode at work, to take 3 rounds around the block, right? If you are splitting or being judgmental about something, you could force yourself to list the goods and the bads about them, right? Yes, they're often late to our appointments, but they're very thoughtful and they are great listeners once they arrive. It's trying to incorporate behaviors and skills into your life in the moment. So if you are having a BPD episode, ask yourself, what skill could I utilize in this moment? If you decide, and that's stuck with me to this day, if you decide, or if you feel like you don't even have a way to make a decision, if you're feeling dissociated, you're feeling so emotionally overwhelmed that you find yourself, you can't even ask yourself that, I just consider what the ramifications of acting on a dysregulated behavior or letting yourself go down a rabbit hole of crying or tears. I'm not saying don't cry. Obviously, we are all going to cry, but it will have an effect on you, and it will. It's either going to leave you feeling very exhausted and tired and unable to do anything else, which is going to bring a second round of emotions that, will accompany that. So now only do you feel shameful about all of your crying, but now you're going to feel shame because you were too tired to go to work the next day. Now you feel like, then that starts a worry wheel. Well, am I going to be in trouble with my boss? They're all going to know I have BPD, blah, blah. It goes on and on and on. So for me, it's not worth it anymore to lose a whole day to being exhausted. It's not worth it anymore to cry my eyes out and feel like I can't get out of bed for the next 18 hours. Now, it's not worth it to me to be on an emotional Ferris wheel, but it does happen still, right? It's just what we're all trying to do, in anything in life, is, if you're actively working on it, for BPD, is to decrease the ineffective behaviors and increase the effective ones. It's easy to be like, well, if I can't do all of the skills 100% right now, like, why bother? I get it. I've been writing a book for the last 15 years, and I'm like, well, if I can't write it all in one day, why even try? Well, you make goals, right? I'll write a chapter today. I'll edit tomorrow. I'll look at the format the next day, right? So it's the same thing with recovering from BPD. You are just, and this is, again, give yourself the gold star wherever you can. You are just trying where you can. So try the next time. If you're about to have a dysregulated moment or something's problematic and you feel your ineffective behaviors creeping up on you, ask yourself, what skill could I use right now? My name's Jen. You've been watching BPD Woman. Thanks for watching. Please consider subscribing. And until I see and talk to you next time, and whatever you do, please be effective. Bye-bye.